It's 6 p.m. on Wednesday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Sung-hee. And these are the top stories we're following at this hour. Having pledged to take the initiative in a fund to help boost youth employment, President Park Geun-hye decides to donate $17,000 to the fund. Central Committee members of Korea's main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy pass reform measures designed to boost flagging support after a series of election defeats. As speculation lingers over whether North Korea's nuclear threats are real or not, the regime continues its provocations, saying the U.S. is the reason behind the escalating tensions. President Park Geun-hye will donate 20 million won, or roughly $17,000 of her own money, to a new fund aimed at creating more jobs for young people. The government hopes her donation will lead to more contributions from both the public and private sectors. Our Hwang Sung-hee starts us off.
$17,000. That's how much President Park Geun-hye will donate to a new fund aimed at helping young job seekers. Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn said during a meeting with other cabinet ministers on Wednesday that the president will also give 20% of her monthly pay to the fund every month. That comes out to roughly 3.2 million won, or $2,700 per month. The Prime Minister said he and other ministers will also follow suit.
We will try to expand voluntary contributions from the leaders of society, as well as the public and private sectors.
Nearly 1 out of 10 people between the ages of 15 and 29 were unemployed as of August, as companies remain reluctant to hire new workers amid the slowing economy. The fund, dubbed the Youth Hope Fund, was introduced by President Park at Tuesday's cabinet meeting. It is expected to be used for running social programs such as tailored training for youth. The government plans to establish a foundation within this year for the management of the new fund, with the hope that it will open up new opportunities to struggling young job seekers. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
And President Park will attend the UN General Assembly in New York next week. In a statement, the presidential office of Cheongwade said Wednesday that the president will present a keynote speech at the UN summit for the adoption of the post-2015 development agenda on September 26th. Participating nations are expected to adopt the so-called 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. President Park will make another keynote address at the 70th UN General Assembly on September 28th. There, she's expected to deliver South Korea's stance on such issues as peace and security, human rights, and sustainable growth. As North Korea points to Washington for creating the possible nuclear crisis on the Korean peninsula, the White House says it would be unwise for Pyongyang to carry out any nuclear or missile tests. Our Connie Kim has this story.
Coming on the heels of North Korea's threats to carry out a fourth nuclear test, the reclusive regime blames the United States for the nuclear crisis on the Korean peninsula. North Korea's state-run Nodong Shinmun said on Wednesday, Washington has always been the destroyer of peace and the escalator of tensions in the two Koreas. It then threatened an arms clash on the peninsula will lead to a sea of fire on the U.S. continent. And with Pyongyang's hinting of possible provocations, the United States continues calls for the North to refrain from actions that aggravate regional tensions. Calling on Pyongyang to focus on fulfilling international obligations and commitments, White House spokesman Josh Earnest said Tuesday that Washington will not accept North Korea as a nuclear state. Earnest emphasized Washington will continue to cooperate with the members of the six-party talks, enabling the North to carry out its promise made during the talks in 2005. That's when Pyongyang pledged to end its nuclear weapons program. The White House view was also echoed by U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell on the same day. Russell said it would be a mistake if North Korea conducts a nuclear or missile test, as it would set back the regime's hopes to grow its economy and end its isolation. The remarks coming from Washington come as Pyongyang warned it would use its nuclear weapons should the U.S. and its allies continue making hostile comments about North Korea. Adding to concerns, the reclusive regime hinted on Monday of another possible rocket launch in the near future. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
So the million-dollar question now is, will North Korea defy all the criticisms coming from the U.S. and really go ahead and conduct a nuclear test? Here's our Han Da-eun with some clues.
North Korea's series of threats to launch a long-range missile and to forge ahead with a nuclear test is almost becoming an annual event. Many South Koreans are immune to such repeated patterns of threat-for-bargain claims, but as unpredictable as North Korea is, no one knows for sure whether the reclusive regime would execute its proclaimed intent. So what will happen this year? While experts remain largely divided, some argue Pyongyang is unlikely to actually launch a long-range missile nor conduct a fourth nuclear test for some very specific reasons.
The announcement was made by a director-level aerospace specialist, not by high-ranking political officials. And unlike in the past, North Korea has not specified the time and place of the possible launch in detail. Also, they still appear to be in the final stages of setting up its new satellite system, meaning the launch can't come anytime soon.
Many experts also point to the international circumstances the isolated state is in as one strong reason why it's unlikely to implement these or further provocations.
Young leader Kim Jong-un is in need of an armed protest for diplomatic bargaining, as well as for domestic purposes. But with greater pressure coming from China, on top of mounting international criticisms, I think it will be difficult for the North to carry out its provocations in reality.
North Korea watchers in Seoul add that Pyongyang is trying to send a message of complaint to the international stage ahead of the planned US-China summit set for next Friday. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy in South Korea adopted new reform initiatives at a Central Committee meeting on Wednesday. The move is part of its efforts to resolve internal feuds and reverse the party's declining popularity. Our Kim Young-gil has the details.
Nearly 400 members were present at the NPAD Central Committee meeting to approve reforms that center on adopting a new nomination process ahead of next year's general elections. The proposals call for an electoral committee of non-party members to nominate candidates for the next parliamentary elections, and including women and the handicapped in the nomination process. With the reform plan endorsed, NPAD chief Moon Jae-in said it was time to end the internal strife and move forward.
Innovation starts from now on. Our party will strive to achieve internal reforms systematically and change the party's culture to make fundamental reforms. We will bring the opposition forces together so that we can gain victory in the upcoming general elections.
Previously, Moon had put his position at stake by threatening to resign if the reform initiative failed to pass the committee meeting, which was in short also a confidence vote in his leadership. However, controversy still surrounds the vote as members of the minority faction within the party refuse to participate. When asked, the non-mainstream members emphasized that the party's new reform plans fail to touch upon the essence of the party's innovation motives. Moon's opponents claim that such an overhaul is designed to favor his followers in picking candidates, and that the party's mainstreamers led by Chief Moon are trying to use the reforms to further their own political agendas. Although Moon has renewed the confidence in his chairmanship through Wednesday's vote, chances are high that non-mainstreamers will defect from the party to form their own coalition. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, bills aimed at revising Korea's labor laws have been submitted to the Parliamentary Proceedings Bureau this afternoon. The submissions come after lawmakers from Korea's ruling Saenuri Party chose to push ahead with 5 major revisions to the related laws. The changes include revisions to the Labor Standards Act, Employment Insurance Act, and the Act on the Protection of Fixed-Term and Part-Time Employees. With the revisions, the ruling party says it hopes to shorten employee working hours. It also says the changes will help prolong the terms of fixed-term and part-time contracts and also shore up unemployment benefits for those temporarily out of work. The world is waiting on the Federal Reserve's decision Thursday in Washington that could raise interest rates in the U.S. for the first time in about a decade. However, with markets still suffering from China's downturn, a growing number of economists are turning to a rate freeze. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
All eyes are on the U.S. Federal Reserve. Many analysts are shifting to a rate freeze this month from a previous consensus expectations of a rate hike. The U.S. dollar fell to a 3-week low against a basket of major currencies on Monday, which Reuters attributed to investors betting on interest rates staying at their record lows until at least December. Around 46% of economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal in September expected a rate hike, which is down sharply from 82% in August. Barclays also ruled out prospects for a rate hike, with analysts pushing back their call for an increase to March next year.
Raising interest rates for the first time in 11 years is always going to be a big deal when it happens. I think it's unlikely, though, that we are actually going to see it delivered upon this week.
The main concern is that a rate increase could exacerbate the already weak global economy. Some worry it could send further turbulence across global financial markets, already hit by the China shock and Beijing's currency devaluation, and possibly spark a financial crisis. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have also voiced concerns about a global slowdown. They suggest the Fed hold off for the time being. However, some analysts say U.S. economic fundamentals are strong enough to support a rate increase, with a handful of U.S. policymakers saying it's time to align the monetary policy with economic progress.
It's the U.S. actually having to decide whether it is more concerned with its own economy or its position in the world.
As things stand, it's unclear what the decision will be. If the Fed decides to make its move, it would bring an end to its loose monetary policy in place since the 2008 global financial crisis and signal that the Fed is confident the U.S. economy is on the right track. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Hungary has declared a state of emergency and introduced new laws that have shut its borders to refugees. To the growing influx of refugees, a Europe without borders appears to be no more. Our Sun Jung-in has the latest.
Hundreds of refugees are stranded on the Serbian side of the Hungarian border, one of their main routes into Western Europe. They were blocked by Hungarian police after Budapest declared a state of emergency and shut the border. The country has implemented harsh new rules for anyone attempting to enter illegally. Frustrated refugees staged a sit-in protest.
We are staying here for a hungry strike. We'll not move of this point to arrive to Vienna. We want to arrive to Vienna.
Serbia, which is not a member of the European Union, has urged Hungary to reopen its crossing points, warning that it will not accept anyone turned back from the border. Romania, which shares a border with Hungary, has also criticized its plan to put up a wire fence along parts of the border to stop asylum seekers looking for alternative ways to enter its territory. Amid the escalating crisis, Germany and Austria have called for an emergency EU summit to address the situation.
It's the responsibility of the entire European Union, and that's why we agreed to have a special EU summit next week.
This as many desperate people continue to risk their lives and make the dangerous crossing across the Mediterranean Sea in an effort to reach Europe. At least 22 refugees, including 4 children, died on Tuesday when their boat capsized off the coast of southwestern Turkey as they were trying to reach Greece. 3 days earlier, at least 34 refugees were killed when their overcrowded boat sank in the same area. Sun Jung-in, Arirang News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his ruling Liberal Democratic Party are aiming to pass a slew of unpopular security bills in the coming days that will enable Japan to send combat troops into action overseas. Public opposition to the bills is mounting by the day, but it's looking increasingly likely that their efforts will be in vain. Our Lee Soo-eun reports.
Student, businessman, or mother, it didn't matter. Some 50,000 protesters, furious with the Abe administration's defense legislation, gathered round the Japanese parliament building with placards emblazoned with messages like "No war, down with Abe," and "Give peace a chance."
I came because all I care about is peace between Asian nations, and I think the security bills don't produce that.
11 new security bills, if enacted, will allow Japanese troops to fight overseas for the first time since World War II, even if its territory is not under attack. Nobel Prize winner Kenzaburo Oe says post-war pacifist Japan will be history if the legislation goes through.
Our constitution of peace will no longer exist.
Public opposition to the bills is growing as the vote moves ever closer. The leaders of Japan's main opposition parties have been extremely vocal in their resistance to Abe's attempt to unilaterally push the bills through parliament.
We will not sit by and watch him ram the bills through. We will do anything to stop it.
However, Abe and the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, which has a majority in the Diet, have signaled that they want the legislation approved within this week. They say it's necessary to deal with the unstable security conditions in Northeast Asia posed by North Korea. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned and goodbye for now.